Michael Vick unveiled multiple members of his Norfolk State coaching staff, but there is one position that is still unfulfilled, and I have questions about the offensive coordinator. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics. Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S, ends with an S. I'm laughing because if you're on the audio side, you may not have seen this. Well, you wouldn't have seen this. But if you're on the video side, we have a new display. And I overcompensated on how small the display was, and I ended up not even pointing on screen. Let's try it again. So you can follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Right on the money. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at Norfolk State women's basketball. They've been extremely dominant in the first 3 games of the MEAC season, but this game in particular was really one to watch. In segment 2, we'll take a look at all of the new coaches that Michael Vick has named at Norfolk State on the football side of things, but segment 1 starts with the person that he did not name, and that is an offensive coordinator, and I have questions about that. The reason I find him not hiring an offensive coordinator interesting is because we all want to know who's going to call plays. Everybody's focused on the offense. Who's calling plays? I think it leaves the option out there. The option. I'm careful with how I'm saying this. Michael Vick not naming an offensive coordinator for Norfolk State opens the door to Vick calling plays himself. I want to be very clear. This is not something that I thought about prior to this weekend. As I get this information, I internalize it. I am fully aware that he could just hire an offensive coordinator by the time I finish my next sentence. I'm fully aware of that. So it does not mean that they will not operate with an offensive coordinator or that the offensive coordinator is already on the staff. These are possibilities, but I want to run through this real quick. Defensive coordinator, offensive line coach, defensive backs coach, defensive line coach, linebackers coach, assistant head coach, special teams coach / recruiting coordinator, director of football operations. Those are the 8 members of the staff that Michael Vick announced. Why is it so? Why am I placing so much emphasis on something that could happen in the future? I find it odd. Michael Vick has had this job for what? About three weeks or so? I think so, right before Christmas. It was definitely before Christmas because I was doing some Christmas shopping when I was listening to his introductory press conference. So you're looking about 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 weeks of something like that. You had enough time to evaluate and decide you wanted a defensive coordinator. You had enough time to evaluate and see you wanted to move your defensive coordinator to special teams coordinator. You had enough time to find the leader of all 3 aspects of the game except for one. So that was already a little odd to me because we're putting so much emphasis. That's the reason. Guys, if this was a running backs coach, which they didn't name, there is no running backs coach here. There is no wide receivers coach here. But not having an offensive coordinator here just makes me wonder, what are we waiting for? Are we looking for a specific guy? Is that person on the staff? Let's go to what is already clear. Technically, you could have not named one and said that we're keeping the offensive coordinator, Jason Phillips. I didn't see that. You look in the directory, he's not there. Maybe it's a to be decided type of situation in which he's not on the staff's directory right now because they still have to figure out whether or not he's going to be on the staff, or maybe they have to come to some sort of conclusion on a contract. But that just doesn't feel likely to me, right? Because he's not in the directory. His Twitter bio, for whatever that's worth, he's a little bit older. So, today people are, I would say, my age and a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older. That Twitter bio means a lot. I don't know if it means so much for him, but there's no Norfolk State in there. Like when you're really looking at this situation, I don't think that Jason Phillips is coming back. So Michael Vick unveils 8 new members of his coaching staff, none of which are the offensive coordinator. The past offensive coordinator isn't in the directory anymore. That would tell me that there's going to be someone new fulfilling that position. Who is it going to be? Let's get interesting, right? Let's just throw something out there. Michael Vick will probably announce who his offensive coordinator is in the next 2 or so weeks. But let's get interesting for a second. What if Michael Vick is the offensive coordinator? That would shock me because it's not something I thought about. Michael Vick has yet to name an offensive coordinator, despite naming a defensive coordinator, despite naming a special teams coach, right? Despite naming an assistant head coach. You have a lot of critical pieces that you've already made decisions on, but you didn't make the decision on the offensive coordinator. So what if Michael Vick decides, I'm a quarterback, I know how to call an offense? It would be the first time. Deion wasn't calling either side of the ball. Eddie George wasn't calling either side of the ball. Eddie Robinson wasn't doing it. I don't think that Deshaun is going to do it. You're looking at these other guys who fit the mold as Michael Vick. They didn't call a side of the ball. But you know what Michael Vick has over all of those other guys? He called the offense in the huddle when he played the game. I think that's different. So has me a little bit intrigued. If I was Vick, though, I wouldn't do it. Right? Like Michael Vick calling plays and using his experience as a quarterback. Michael Vick may very well believe that I played quarterback. I called offenses in the huddle. I've done all of these things. I can call offense in a game. And I'm not here to tell him that he's wrong, but I also believe that as a first-time coach, not just head coach, but as a first-time coach, that's putting a lot on your plate to not only oversee everybody, but then to also call plays. It's a lot of responsibility. I was recently listening to a show. I was listening to Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. And they were talking about how if you're going to call plays on the offensive side of the ball, you have to truly trust your defensive coordinator to handle everything, to essentially be a head coach, because you're going to be extending yourself so much by being the offensive play caller and being a head coach that you're not going to be able to spend that much time with the defense. If I were Vick and I had never coached before, I'd want to be an overseer. I wouldn't want to put everything on my plate immediately. That's just making my job harder from the jump. Now, once you get into it and you're like, okay, I can oversee, and then maybe you move into calling plays. But I don't think that this is something I would personally recommend for Michael Vick to do from the first game, from the first week. I would suggest that you go get an offensive coordinator for Norfolk State. That would be my suggestion. Just in general, that's my idea on it. So I want to push forward because in addition to Michael Vick not having an offensive coordinator, there was one thing that really surprised me. I want to make sure I want to say that. If he calls plays, this is going to be something that we've never seen as far as his contemporaries. And I will be watching patiently because I don't know what that looks like because he's never coached. Right. I just want to stress it so much because this next thing is also going to be about experience. This whole first 2 segments is about experience, but it's going to sound like it's about ability, but it's not even about that. It's not about ability at all. It's not about his ability to coach plays or call plays. It's about the fact that that's a lot of work for somebody who's never been a head coach. Can we take it one step at a time? They say walk before you run. I understand Michael Vick probably didn't do that. Watching him on the field, he probably ran before he walked. Somebody had to be like, hey, it's time for you to walk, buddy. But in this situation, it's time for you to walk, buddy. Like, you got to take it step by step. That's my personal opinion. And I expect that we will see an offensive coordinator named in sometime soon. Just an interesting hypothetical that him not naming an offensive coordinator allowed us to dig into. Let's push forward and look at who he did name. I named 8 members of the staff, but I gave no names. Let's reveal all of those guys, and I'll give another experience versus ability conversation There's not a lot of experience or as much experience as I thought that there would be on this staff. Let's look at that as we continue rolling with today's episode of Locked On HBCU. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you'll get real-time updates. So every step of the way, you'll know exactly what type of progress that they're making. And you get the most money back guaranteed. And while you go all about your day, no stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On. Check out Locked On Ohio State, man. Sheesh. Ohio State, Notre Dame. Make sure you're checking those two teams out. Michael Vick has named his coaching staff, and I gave you the positions earlier. Now I want to give you the coaches, who they actually are, and then also give their experience, because I wasn't going to give a disclaimer, but I felt like the last part of talking about Michael Vick calling plays, I wanted to be very clear that I was speaking about the unknown and what I think is best for him. What I thought was best for him on his coaching staff is to have a very experienced staff. This is my personal opinion. If you are a head coach with limited coaching experience, in this case, no coaching experience, the smartest thing for you to do is to go get an experienced staff. Because last thing you need is to be an inexperienced head coach worrying about other inexperienced head coaches. I don't think, or excuse me, not head coaches, but positional coaches and coordinators. That's the last thing that you need. You need people who are going to take care of you when you're not looking. Obviously, that comes with trust and things of that nature, but it's not just about trust, because trust is to give your best effort, right? Like, I trust my brother and my sister to do things, but they're kids. Like they're young. There's a limit on it, but I trust them. But if I wanted to get done to a grown-up degree, I'm probably going to ask a grown-up. And that's a terrible analogy. It's actually a pretty good analogy in my opinion, but it's a terrible analogy because I don't want to call these inexperienced coaches kids. But here's the thing. There's certain things that they may not be best equipped to do because they have not done it for as long. I don't think experience equals ability, but I do think ability is maximized through experience, right? So when you're a limited experience head coach, I want to go get people who I know I can lean on at any moment. Not just I trust to give their best, but I know Fred McNair as your tight ends coach. I have a former head coach as my tight ends coach. Wow. We're going through another coaching cycle and no one has mentioned Fred McNair. No one has mentioned Fred McNair. Does he return back to Mississippi from Mississippi Valley State? That's interesting. I've heard no mention of Fred McNair. Anyway, let's get to the 8 guys that Coach Vick has announced. So you go with Terrence Garvin, defensive coordinator, coaching since 2022. So that's 3 years that he's been a defensive coordinator. Spent 6 years in the NFL, and he was teammates with Michael Vick in not Penn State, but at Pittsburgh, right, in 2015. Elton Brown, offensive line coach. He was 12 years of high school, has been a head coach, but he has been an offensive coordinator. In a degree, that is a reasonable ascension. I've been an offensive coordinator. I'm going to come up and be a positional coach. It is a drop in status while a rise in subdivision. So I get it. But no FCS experience either. Terrence Garvin, no FCS experience. Only at NAIA Florida Memorial. Jabo Smith. He's been coaching since 2017. So we got a little bit more experience here. You got 8 years total, 4 of those in college, 4 of those on a high school level. The problem is NAIA. Once again, no FCS experience. Izon Cross, defensive line coach. Smith was a defensive backs coach for the record. But Cross, defensive line coach. He had 2 years at a prep school in high school, or a head coach in high school, a prep school. A couple years as a camp director, and then some confusing length of time at North Atlanta High School. I was on his LinkedIn. I couldn't quite tell if it was multiple years. He had a time when he was from the spring to October as a positional coach, but the season isn't over in October. So I wonder what happened. I just think it wasn't formatted the best way. So I'm going to say just an additional year. So you're looking at 3 years of coaching at your defensive line coach as well. Leroy Reynolds, he's your linebackers coach. He has no experience. At best, you could say he was a mentor at IMG. At best, you can say he's a mentor at IMG. That's what he has on here. There's no official position. He's not a positional coach. He's not a coordinator. He's a guy who played in the NFL. And if you want to hear something that's kind of interesting, he played in Atlanta, New York, the New York Jets, and then also in Philadelphia. Those are all 3 places that Michael Vick played. But in none of those destinations did they ever cross paths as far as being on the roster. That's interesting to me. But yeah, those are the ones that I'm really upset about. I'm like, this is limited experience. As I've gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these guys, or 4 of these guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of these guys. I haven't heard one FCS tenure. I even have a coach who has no coaching experience. All right. So now I'm just surprised. When I get to Darrell Bullock is arguably my favorite hire of everybody. Of all the people he's named, which isn't hard because I've been kind of critical of the previous 5, but Darrell Bullock is my favorite hire because he's been coaching since before I was born. So I can't sit here and say they have no experience because he got 30 years of experience. So he can spread that on. He got something to give. He Oprah with it. You get a year, you get a year, you get a year. Because I can spread this out now on average. You probably averaging 10 years. Probably averaging 10 years, and make me forgive Smith not having any FCS experience and forgive me not having any college experience from Elton Brown. Like, I can look past these things, right? Garvin was a co-defensive coordinator, and he was a co-defensive coordinator with Smith at Florida Memorial over the last couple of years. I think maybe 2 years for Jabo, and in 3 years he was just a defensive coordinator for Garvin. But Darrell Bullock, he's the assistant head coach. And if anybody deserved it, it's him. He has professional experience. He has head coaching experience. He has professional coaching experience. He has collegiate coaching experience. He has HBCU experience. He just came from Hampton. Where they were a really good run team. So I already know 30 years of experience under his belt. That's who I want to be my assistant head coach. I think he provides everything that you want in an assistant head coach. When I'm looking at Deshaun Jackson, I'm going to put him in this conversation too. When I'm looking at Deshaun Jackson, I'm looking at Michael Vick. What I want in an assistant head coach is somebody who can be their tour guide, somebody who can show them the ropes, somebody who can help guide them through this process that they're complete rookies at. For Deshaun Jackson, that's his friend Travis Clark. It is a mentor. It's somebody with 15 years of head coaching experience on the high school level. While he's never coached in college, this still feels like something that he can help Deshaun with. And they have a relationship to where he's going to have his ear and he's going to be able to tell Deshaun, yeah, this way, and Deshaun is going to listen. For Michael Vick, it's Darrell Bullock. And when I'm looking at Bullock, I'm looking at 30 years of experience, extreme level of experience on the HBCU level, someone who has been in these positions, not as a head coach, maybe even positioned to be a head coach, and that's why he took this job, but someone who can say, this is what I've seen, this is what I've experienced, let me show you the ropes because I've been here, I built this ring. I think that these are phenomenal hires for Travis Clark, and then also for Darrell Bullock as being the assistant head coach at Norfolk State and Delaware State. I love it. Darrell Bullock has been around the block more times than you can count, and he's the perfect person to be the GPS for Michael Vick, and that's because he's been at Morgan State, he's been at Hampton, he's coached professionally, he has 30 years of experience. This is an assistant head coach who you want to show your inexperienced head coach the ropes, because like I said, assistant head coach is somebody you need full trust in. You need somebody who is going to guide you. If we're talking about tour guides, I think Travis Clark and I think that Darrell Bullock are great tour guides for Deshaun Jackson and Michael Vick at Delaware State and Norfolk State. But there's one more guy I want to look at, Steve Adams. Steve Adams, he was your defensive coordinator last year. I thought they could have just left him there, but whatever. I thought they had some pretty good talent that they were developing out there, but they moved him to special teams coordinator and recruiting coordinator, which he's done before. He's done that at Southern. They had really good punt returns. I still don't know how to feel about him moving spots. I don't know if I should be excited, but he does bring 15 years of experience. So if we're talking about the experience factor, he will bring that. And I want to make sure that we're not heading down a path of ability and just talking about experience. The reason I think experience is so important is because you just need somebody or some people rather that you can just, I ain't even got to worry about them. I ain't got to worry about them. Because if you have an experienced head coach, he might look and be like, I'm going to check out this DC real quick. Okay. He good. You ain't got to check out Bullock. I can state, hey, I'm never going to his 15-yard range. He got it. But as we push forward, talking about people who got it, Norfolk State women's basketball. We all on the Spartans today. Norfolk State women's basketball really does have it because they've been dominant and they just beat Coppin State in a game that I guess she's never been on the show. I want to say friend of the show, but great Twitter follow. Live for Hoops. That was a battle of the first and second best women's basketball team in the HBCU landscape. Let's break that down as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Listen, if you're going to Game Time, you got to be looking for the best deals. You got to be looking for the best perks. And if you're a person who's trying to go somewhere, I don't understand why you wouldn't want the best deals and the best perks, especially on tickets. It's not like you can't be bougie with tickets. You can't be bougie with tickets. It's not, I only get my tickets from so-and-so. That seat is that seat. If you buy that seat from fill in the blank, it's going to be the same seat that you buy from Game Time. So why not go to the place that's guaranteed to have the better price? Why not go to the place that's not trying to mislead you, not trying to show you X amount of dollars, but when you click on it, now it's so much more. Why don't you go to that person? For me, I'm only going to Game Time. If I'm trying to make my way on to the Monday Night Raw, it's Game Time. That's it. Simple and plain. And you should be the same way, whether it's a football game in your area, a wrestling event, a comedy show, a concert, or anything in between. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I forgot one person in there. DeMarcus McMillan, he's director of football operations, and they've known each other. Him and Vick have known each other since high school. McMillan has done some youth events and things of that nature. I just forgot to mention him, but I want to move on to Norfolk State women's basketball team now. They just knocked off Coppin State. And Live for Hoops, if you don't follow her, it's LIVFORHOOPS. So it's spelled with all words, no numbers or anything of that nature. But great Twitter follower, in my opinion. You got to follow her if you want to stay up to date on women's basketball. I know we don't talk about it a ton on the show, but if there's things that I want to say, most times I'm looking at her content. It's like, okay, I want to make sure I'm up to date so that when I do talk about this, I know what's been going on. I know what is going on. I know some of the players. So in general, we're actually going to reference 2 of her tweets today and what she's done. So let me make sure I have that pulled up because, man, Norfolk State, we know who they are. We know how dominant that they've been. But they just had a game against Coppin State, and it was one between the top 2 teams in women's basketball, not just in the MEAC, but all of HBCU women's basketball if you go by her rankings. Norfolk State was 1. They came out of here as a strong 1. They won this game 82-66. Okay, cool. Angel Jones for Coppin State, definitely a walking bucket, definitely a problem. Played all 40 minutes, walked away with 29 points, 8 boards. But on the Norfolk State side, I love how versatile they are. I love how many people can come up and step up. You got Kierra Wheeler, you got Diamond Johnson, and Wheeler had her second double-double of the MEAC season. This time, 19 points, 14 rebounds. You had Diamond Johnson who came in with 15 as well. But what about Anjanae Richardson? Richardson comes in with 18 points. What about Debria Clark? She comes in with 13, right? And these are players that you have a top 2, but you have multiple threats. Anjanae Robinson can or Richardson can do this. You have Debria Clark, she could do it. You have Nia Fields, she could do it. You feel confident with so many different players with them, and I think that is by far their best ability. That's the thing that really gets me. But Kierra Wheeler, man, I think it's fun when you have two players who are fighting it out for Player of the Year on the same team. When you have them fighting out for Player of the Year on the same team, because essentially Kierra Wheeler and Diamond Johnson are just in heavy competition every single week. And I had the luxury of having both of those ladies on the show. It was phenomenal. But in general, Norfolk State has been dominating the landscape. Let's look at the games that they played. So they just knocked off Coppin State by 16. The game before, they knocked off Delaware State by 40 points, 94-54. And then you look at Maryland Eastern Shore, they beat them 72-54. So they're scoring above 70 every week. Coppin State did have the best performance, and that's because you have Angel Jones, who is a walking bucket and can give you 29 points. But in general, this was a good bar. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. But this was a good game to gauge, who Norfolk State would be in this round, right? Because we've seen what they did out of conference, but sometimes you get geeked up for those out of conference games because you got a point to prove. Sometimes you have that same feeling in conference games. Sometimes you don't. But in general, you see they're coming out to make a statement. I think that they could easily get a 14 seed. I really do, with the things that they've done. And I hate to look that far into the future again and again and again. I should stop doing it. I'm going to try to. But every time I talk about them, I can't help but look towards March. They have so many different pieces. They have Kierra Wheeler, they have Diamond Johnson, and they lead the team. But then you can go get Richardson, you can go get Clark, right? You can go get Fields. All three of those women can give you additional scoring. Until they're beaten a couple of times, until they've been beaten a couple of times, it's hard to not say that Norfolk State is the best women's basketball team out. And I know we got Coppin State versus Howard tonight. Well, probably already going on. It's probably already going on because this show is going to air at 6:30. But anyway, that was the little recap I want to give on them. Tomorrow's episode going to be all about FAMU. I don't think any crazy news is going to break on Monday, so I feel comfortable saying that finally FAMU season in review will be here tomorrow. We'll break down Cozy Year 1, Cozy Year 2. Those are two different segments, and I think that they're both important conversations to have. So we'll do that on tomorrow. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.